One of the best ways to learn anything is by experiencing it firsthand. That's exactly what Wellington High School teacher Rick Phelps had in mind when he asked his U.S. history class to meet at 6:45 in the morning. As sleepy-eyed students began to emerge out of the darkness, Mr. Phelps directed traffic and informed students which bus they were assigned to. When everyone was sorted and in their seats, the caravan of history students set sail from Wellington and hit the open road. While students left their hometown behind, they made their way to someone else's. That someone else was a five-star general who served as Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in Europe during World War II and later became the 34th President of the United States. His name, Dwight D Eisenhower, and his hometown, Abilene, Kansas. But before we paid a visit to President Eisenhower, we made a stop at the White House. Well, not the White House, but still pretty impressive.
The first place we went was the Seelye Mansion, originally owned by A.B. Seelye. He sold medicines, was not officially a doctor, but he called himself Dr. Seelye, and he built a home that they told us there to replicate today would cost about $14 million to rebuild it.
When Seelye built the mansion in 1905, he spared no expense making the home comfortable for his wife and two daughters. The inside of the mansion is like a living time capsule. Almost everything inside is original, including the fireplace designed by Tiffany, the Steinway piano, the Edison phonographs, and the light fixtures.
It has original Edison light fixtures that Thomas Edison himself brought to the home and sold to the family. They have some of the original Edison light bulbs still in the home. Those bulbs, they told us, lasted about 90 years. It's just a fantastic place for here in Kansas.
The light fixtures and much of the furniture was purchased and ordered at the 1904 World's Fair specifically for use in the home. If that's not impressive enough, the famous architect Frank Lloyd Wright remodeled the mansion's interior in the 1920s. As students explored the mansion from top to bottom, they gained a better understanding of life in the early 20th century and its technology.
Our tour guide said when we saw the Edison record player in the basement, it still ran, and he's had it playing for us, and he's like, yeah, let's just see if your iPhone's working 120 years. And I was like, thought about it, and I was like, that's kind of true.
Students also learned about the Seelye family themselves. Seelye's daughters, Helen and Marion, were just little girls when the house was built. The two girls never got married and lived in the house until they were in their 90s. One item the two girls selected for the mansion when they first moved in is still down in the basement. It may look a bit different from today's models, but this contraption is an early 20th century bowling alley. The balls used are much smaller than the ones used by modern players. The alley, which was also purchased at the World's Fair, can be reset by pulling a lever, and it even returns the ball to the player. Not bad for early 20th century technology. After students returned to the first floor and joined in an impromptu performance of the state song Home on the Range, it was time for lunch. And when you're on a history field trip, why not eat at a restaurant that's a piece of history itself? The Brookville Hotel was built in the 1870s, and they've been serving their famous family-style chicken dinners since 1915. This is not the original building, but their chicken is still crowd-pleasing.
We're at the Brookville Hotel, which originally was from the town of Brookville, and they've rebuilt it here in Abilene. It's a family-style fried chicken, mashed potatoes and gravy, and corn and biscuits, and ice cream and lemonade. And I think the kids thought it was a little bit better than school lunch.
After getting their bellies full, the students then made their way to the Dwight D Eisenhower Complex, which includes his presidential library, museum, and his boyhood home. Their first stop was at the museum. As the students wandered through the museum, soaking in all that surrounded them, it quickly became apparent that this man was not only important to the United States, but also to the world.
Eisenhower was the Supreme Allied Commander of all troops in Europe in World War II. He led the greatest invasion in the history of the world on D-Day. He was highly respected throughout the world, parades in London, New York, Washington, D.C., but he never forgot that he was from Abilene, Kansas, and he even came back here for Welcome Home parade after his service, and then, of course, as President of the United States. So I just try to encourage my students to understand, hey, you can be from a small town in Kansas and accomplish some pretty awesome things.
On top of those great accomplishments, Eisenhower also became the first Supreme Commander of NATO, served as Army Chief of Staff under President Harry Truman, was the president of Columbia University, used nuclear threats to conclude the Korean War with China, authorized the establishment of NASA, and launched the interstate highway system. He also signed civil rights legislation to protect the right to vote and implemented desegregation of the armed forces. Many Western scholars rank Eisenhower as one of the top 10 greatest U.S. presidents. Junior Josh Amos says he was definitely impressed.
It was really cool. It was cool, just learning about all he's done and how he was a general in World War II and he was almost in World War I, and just he's accomplished a lot, and it's just really cool to see all that.
After learning what Eisenhower did later in his life, students then got to see where his life began. This is Eisenhower's boyhood home. The family moved here in 1898. Even though he was actually born in Texas, Eisenhower's family moved to Abilene when he was about 2 years old. Eisenhower spent his entire childhood here. He graduated from Abilene High School in 1909 and later attended the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. Eisenhower cherished Abilene so much that he chose it for his final resting place. This is where Eisenhower was buried in 1969 and his wife in 1979.
My favorite part of the trip so far has got to be the Palace of Meditation. It's the tomb of a president. I mean, it even looks wonderful, and you get this feeling of bliss being in there. This guy did something wonderful for everyone.
As the field trip came to an end, everyone seemed to agree that the experience definitely made up for coming to school at 6:45 in the morning.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's so worth it. It's this is such a good experience to really get out of town and go see something new and educate yourself and become more aware of the information and the people that have come from Kansas and what they've done, especially President Eisenhower.
That's exactly what Mr. Phelps says he had in mind when he planned the trip.
Just seeing them excited about getting to see stuff that they probably never imagined existed in Kansas, in a small town in Kansas like this.
Mr. Phelps also says the trip wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for the generous people of Wellington.
The thing that's very helpful to us is that we have people that sponsor this trip. A number of the merchants in Wellington give maybe as little as $25, some $100 or $200. We also had the REC donate a fair amount of money, and the Kansas Star, and so all this is paid for through those donations. None of it's paid for with school money, tax dollars, or anything like that. And the great part is the kids didn't have to pay a dime to come here because of those great donations.
For Channel 55, I'm Caleb Johnston.